Hey, jazz fans, this is Canadian pop crooner Matt Forbes coming at you from Los Angeles, California. You're watching Jazz Across the Pond with the Jazz Cat and Mr. G. Stick around, we're going to talk some shop and have some fun. Feel the vibe, feel the terror, feel the pain, it's driving me insane. I can't fake, for God's sake, why am I driving in the wrong lane? Trouble is my middle name, but in the end I'm not too bad. Can someone tell me if it's wrong to be so mad about you? Mad about you. Are you the fishy wine that will give me a headache in the morning? Or just a dark blue landmine that will explode without a decent warning? Give me all your true hate and I'll translate it in our bed into never seen passion, that's why I am so mad about you. Mad about you. Mad. Trouble is your middle name, but in the end you're not too bad. Can someone tell me if it's wrong to be so mad about you? Mad about you. Mad about you. Mad about you. Mad about you. Give me all your true hate and I'll translate it in our bed into never seen passion. That is why I am so mad about you. Mad about you. Mad about you. I'm so mad about you. Mad about you.
Well, to be honest with yourself, after listening to that amazing track, I really feel Kevin and myself should be sat here in tuxedos and a bow tie. And we should have vodka martini, shaken, not stirred, stood to one side. Because if Barbara Broccoli doesn't pick up the phone and go, that is the new thing for the new James Bond movie, we've got a serious problem here. Ladies and gentlemen, what an incredible track. I stumbled across that track by accident about a year ago. Played it on Jazz Moods, and the phone line lit up with people going, "Is this the Daniel Craig new theme song?" And I went, "Nope."
No.
No, it isn't. It's a track, it's called Mad About You. And I know by the end of this interview, our followers on Jazz Across the Pond are going to be mad about you. What a link.
Oh,
All right, then.
my goodness, what an intro.
Mr. Segway himself. Wow.
Yes, the real deal, a superstar in the making, destined to become a household name. These are just a few of the remarkable endorsements echoing from radio stations right across the United States of America. And I'm now jumping on it for the UK, and I'm doing it across the United Kingdom as well. That's being said, but our guest tonight on Jazz Across the Pond is bringing a bold new sound to vintage pop. Our guest is being hailed as a free shot voice to hit the genre, the best one in decades. Ladies and gentlemen, Jazz Across the Pond, we are proud, we're honored to have the man himself, Mr. Matt Forbes, join us.
Oh, I like him. Thank you so much. Good to be with you both after we've been chasing each other, but we're finally here. And it's
Okay, so I let you
it's so good
catch
to see you.
me, so now let's get the interview done. Let's go.
Yeah, there we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jazz Across the Pond, Matt Forbes, welcome to our show, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Not a problem. Right. A native of Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. Now, when I used to work on the ships in America, we used to do we used to leave New York, go to Boston, up to Halifax, Nova Scotia, down the St. Lawrence River, right down to Montreux, Quebec, all the rest of it. And it was a brilliant cruise. It was a sellout. We went to Forbes, and it was, so I do know Halifax, Nova Scotia very, very well.
Amazing.
Fabulous place.
Yes.
Sure. Yes. I had a late night there one night, I seem to recall, but never mind. That's another story. So,
yes. No, many people do. Yeah.
You now
Good port city. Yeah.
You now reside in Los Angeles since 2011. Matt, would you please tell our followers more about your childhood in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and when you first were introduced into big band Corona music and that, and you went, wow, I like it, and your first taste of singing, sir?
Yes. Well, I grew up in Halifax, which is a beautiful East Coast city in Canada, and a rich art scene, but it's a small city and a small province. So, dreaming of Los Angeles and New York, which I'd live in both cities, was a far cry from these places. But parents were always very into music, vintage, they themselves grew up on 70s and 80s pop rock. So I listened to a lot of that, but they always loved Ella and the crooners and that old school big band jazz, very eclectic taste. So I had a really eclectic upbringing musically, and I guess it was around the time I was 5 or 6 that I started putting some of these things together, that's Frank Sinatra and that's Fly Me to the Moon. And of course you don't know genres, you just know you like it. And it would be a little later, in my teenage years, that you'd start to see names like Nelson Riddle and Quincy Jones and, all these people that we bow at the altar of, stand on the shoulders of. But that's when the education really amped. It started with just kind of a general, just loving the music and loving that era. Before I found the stage and music and acting, I was pretty set on being an animator, illustrator. In fact, my brothers are both. They kind of carried on, and now they're art directors for Cartoon Network. So they really saw it through. But we were all obsessed, the three of us, with these old Max Fleischer cartoons, the Popeyes and Betty Boops. And of course, those great 30s cartoons, which are so subversive, featured these great, musical acts like Cab Calloway and Louis Armstrong and Don Redman. So that New York urban 30s jazz was in my bones from a young age. And I didn't even really, and of course, you're not putting these things together till much later in therapy. But I know that I love that music. I love, just that whole kind of vaudeville tradition that then pushed into obviously what we know as the atomic bassy and the 50s, 60s big band stuff that would follow. But that's kind of where it began, and then started performing in high school, doing a lot of plays and musicals, and got bitten by that bug and put the pencil down and kind of pursued that. And
weren't you like the Cowardly Lion and the Wizard of Oz?
Yes, you've read my memoir. That was the first role, the Burt Lahr part, and even then they had to lower the keys. I remember the band lead. Of course, it was before my voice dropped, but it was still low. And but yeah, doing those musicals, the funny thing about doing musicals is that you start to realize that so many of these songs that Sinatra and Nat Cole and Ella, so many of them are drawn from the musical theater, from
Absolutely.
those great old Cole Porter and Gershwin shows, and Rodgers and
Jerome
Hart.
Kern and
Absolutely. And I loved all of that. I love classic musical comedy, and I love and then you realize that, the pop world, Broadway was popular music at one point. And so it all just started to gel. And then I went to NYU for Tisch School of the Arts for drama. And for 4 years, I did very serious, angsty drama at Stella Adler, which was very good training. And I think actually all that stuff, I think, informs what I'm doing now, because I think these songs, the Great American Songbook, certainly, really, they're little 3-act plays, even kind of the lighter tunes. You kind of have to give them a place to go. Otherwise, they just kind of sit there. The arrangement can be great, but it's still, there's a story to be told, I think, in every song, but certainly these ones. So it's the acting and the music always kind of went hand in hand. And I feel now doing this, what I'm doing now, it's kind of allowing me to tap into all those things I loved in my youth, and was kind of working at consciously and subconsciously, which is kind of fun. It's a fun place to arrive at,
Well, Matt, it's pretty evident. You've alluded to it. You got a bachelor's degree of fine arts from NYU, the School of Arts. And the other thing I found fascinating is about the same time you developed this strange addiction for the producers. Now,
yeah.
Mel Brooks's 1967 film, The Producers, great film. I think you watched it maybe a little too much from what I understand. But it also became a huge Broadway monster hit from 2001 to 2007. Now, one of the things about your bio that has really touched me is that you've mentioned the late, great American actor of stage, film, and television, Mr. Gary Beach, as a hero and mentor during your early years. Now, Gary was an outstanding actor who received the Tony Award for his Broadway performance with the original cast of The Producers. If you would you share with our viewers how you came to know Gary Beach and how his influence continues to guide your career today?
Yes, absolutely. Now, Gary was a very, a very special performer. I mean, he was the original Lumiere in Beauty and the Beast, and played Thénardier and Les Mis. I mean, had just this incredible career as a character lead on Broadway, and a magnificent singer. And I guess it was in high school that, you're doing a lot of plays, and of course Nathan Lane, who's a big theatrical giant, you try and get your hands on anything he's doing. And of course, The Producers was the biggest thing in many, many years. So I became obsessed with that cast album. And then I got to New York, actually, when I was auditioning for NYU, a pre-college program. I met Gary. I wrote him a note, and they were all in the show. It was when they came back to the show for like 4 months for like $100,000 a week. But I wrote Gary, and he invited me, and I was with my mom at the time, backstage, and we chatted for 25 minutes and kind of told him my story and where I was thinking of heading. And so that kind of began it. We began kind of pen paling, and then fast forward, almost a year later, when I get into NYU, he becomes a bit of a mentor. You can visit him backstage, see him in this show, that show, and just a very generous soul, in a business that can be a little ungenerous in the current era. In the past, it was a very generous business, with the George Burns pulling up, the Bobby Darrens, or, just people helping each other out. You don't see that as much anymore. But Gary was that special exception that I think he saw young talent, and because I was also kind of an old soul, he said, if you can survive till you're 30, the world will open up for you. And he was right, because he knew the sensibility, when I was 18, 19, I was an old soul, but you look 18, 19. And so the roles that you write for, your sensibility, your age hasn't quite caught up to where your taste. So he was just a really great guiding force, and to meet one of your heroes. I mean, they always say don't meet your heroes, but he, again, was kind of the exception, that he was just a guy who I think was truly grateful for the good success that he had found in this business. And to see him work on stage, it's his performance is still captured in the movie version. But he's one of those performers that I think to really understand and see the magic, you have to kind of see live. I remember him telling me a story about seeing Ethel Merman in a revival of Annie Get Your Gun in the 60s. Wow. And he said, you'd watch until he was a young man at that point. But he said, you see Ethel in film and it wouldn't really translate. Sort of like Jolson. You see Jolson, you go, I don't get it. But then to see it live in a theater, he said, it just, blew your mind. It was a whole other thing. And he was very much of that school as well, just kind of magic to watch on stage and in total command of what he was doing. I think it's the same thing with Bobby Darin that I so appreciate, those guys that work at it so much that, it's hard work, but you never know it. There's not a bead of sweat. It's just that cool ease from years of preparation and really knowing what they're doing. So, it was a real gift to know him during those 4 years I was at NYU. And then this track, That Face, this new single we released from the show, which he doesn't sing, it's a Matthew Broderick number. We kind of decided to do that kind of in tribute to that whole special part of my existence, because I'd be doing this very serious drama downtown at NYU, which was good to stretch you, but I was always a kind of a funny guy, and I'd later do Second City and Groundlings here in Los Angeles. But I needed just a refuge for all this angst, and the producers and Gary and that whole crew did that for me. So it's nice to kind of pay it off now.
You're mentioning That Face. I mean, we are going to actually play That Face
yes.
in a moment's time, because again, blew Kevin and myself away. Before then, I find that your soulful vocals and your unmistakable sound are wooing the millenniums of your own generation with songs that made popular decades before more than that. And so the album Coulda, Woulda, Shoulda, which is a brilliant album, it was recorded in historical Capitol Studios in Hollywood in California. It features the original arrangements by our acclaimed London composer. See, Kevin, no. Okay. Callum Au. Now, Callum Au, a few months ago, we interviewed the beautiful, the fabulous Claire Martin, OBE. And of course, she and Callum Au produced her fabulous album, Stories, a fabulous album. So very quickly, because I want to play that track.
Sure.
How did you come across Callum, and what did he bring to the table for that fabulous album? And of course, the we did tonight.
Yes, Callum it's great luck that I came across him. It was about 2013, and I was singing with Seth MacFarlane's big band. He kind of takes his Family Guy orchestra around town and does kind of Sinatra tunes, takedowns and whatnot. And so he was getting very busy doing Ted and some of his film stuff. So the band leader, composer for the show, Ron Jones, invited me to start singing, and he's like, "Do you have any charts?" And I said, "No, but I could get some charts." And he said, "Well, yeah, whether they're takedowns or originals," he said, "just, bring them in and you can do your catalog." So I was looking for an arranger who could kind of take down some obscure Sinatra type arrangements. And it just so happened that Callum in Google was the second result. And I didn't know that he was at the time 23, 24. He just, he's worked for BBC Concert Orchestra and, he had a wonderful CV at that point already. And so it began with just kind of him doing a takedown of, an old Sinatra obscurity. But then we got to doing Coulda, Woulda, Shoulda, the first kind of full album. And he's like, we can do some original stuff. We don't need to do, be slave to the Sinatra charts. And that's kind of where my interest, that's where I got excited, kind of really finding ways to reimagine. And that first album is a mix of the two. There's some brand new original charts with some updates of existing on that Coulda, Woulda, Shoulda. And with every subsequent album, it's become more and more just my original and Callum's original arrangements. And I think that's really where the fun and challenge of, investigating this music is it's great that you have those iconic arrangements by Billy Byers and Billy May and the Billies. But for me, it's what new can you, what's something new you can bring to it. And Callum what's genius about Callum is that especially now, we've been working together for almost a decade. We have such a shorthand it usually begins with me choosing songs, but then coming up with a concept for it. And it sometimes can be 1,200 words and voice memos and me plunking things on the piano that I'll send to him. And he'll brilliantly dissect. He'll edit out, you know, the bad ideas that aren't going to work. He'll add many of his own. And it really becomes this great collaboration where I kind of create the sandbox that we're going to build this little sandcastle in. And it's give and take. So it's wonderful to find someone who kind of knows what you do, how you like to approach a song, and what you need to kind of support you, regardless of whether it's up tempo, a ballad, or with something kind of pared back. He kind of over the last 8 or 9 years is, you know, we've dialed into what makes us both tick, and That Face, one of the most recent singles. He just knocked it out of the park. He wasn't totally familiar with the show, but I said, this is kind of a ballad, a Fred and Ginger ballad from the show. But I said, I think this could be, we could kind of do a Billy May, you know, Luck Be a Lady kind of approach to it, you know, because I grew up, I learned Guys and Dolls. I did Guys and Dolls in high school, but I learned that show from listening to the Reprise repertory musical theater albums. That are hard to get, but Frank and Dean and Bing and all these people were on them, and I thought, why don't we do that to this? Take it out of its legit musical theater and swing it. And boy, did he! He really did a bang up job.
It was now consciously aware of time, and I know our followers are going, we keep hearing about That Face. Can we hear it? Kevin, a very quick question. Can we have a quick answer from yourself? Because I want to play this track.
Let's do this. Let's just go ahead and do the intro. Let's get that song on because it is a fabulous song. So we are going to take a short break to listen to Matt's latest single, which released June 10th, an early birthday present for Mr. G, titled That Face. Oh, it's June 12th. Titled That Face, as if you didn't already realize that because we've only said that face about 7 times. But the music and lyrics by Mel Brooks from his Tony Award-winning musical, The Producers. This single is lovingly dedicated to the late, great Mr. Gary Beach, and we'll be right back.
The urge to merge can rob us of our senses. The need to breed can make a man a drone. We must be on alert with our defenses, for every skirt will test testosterone. So knowing this, I've severed all connection with any creature sporting silk or lace. I was firmly headed in the right direction when suddenly I stumbled on that face. That face, that face, that dangerous face. I must be unwise. Those lips, that nose, those eyes could lead to my demise. That face, that marvelous face, I never should begin. Those cheeks, that neck, that chin will surely do me in. I must be smart and hide my heart if she's within a mile. If I don't duck, I'm out of luck. She'd kill me with that smile. That face, that fabulous face. It's clear I must beware. I'm certain if I fall in love, I'm lost without a trace. But it's worth it for that face. Go! I must be smart and hide my heart if she's within a mile. If I don't duck, I'm out of luck. She'd kill me with that smile, that face, that face, that fabulous face. It's clear I must beware. I'm certain if I fall in love, I'm lost without a trace. But it's worth it for that face. Yeah, it's worth it for that
Well, we just watched the video, and the video is incredible, and the song is just unbelievable.
Oh, you're very kind. It is a great. Mel Brooks knows how to write a really great tune. You know,
it's amazing. Who would have thunk it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I know. No, it's delightful, right? It's and that arrangement, boy, it cooks.
Wonderful.
That band is something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as a lone baritone in the sea of pop tenors, the Canadian crooner is drawing widespread acclaim for his dynamic, soulful reinterpretation of these fabulous pop songs made new style. Whether swinging Great American Songbook. So Matt, what brings you to these classic songs? We've alluded to it about your childhood and how you listen
Sure.
to but when you hear, because I know there are artists out there who have done not as good as yourself, but have taken a pop song, tried to do their own little version of it. So
Sure.
when you hear a song, a standard pop song, what gives you the inspiration to think, do you know, I think I could actually give it a little twist and go along with that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's something that I've gotten a little better at answering for myself as I've gone on, because they're not all winners. Sometimes, I learned early on that even though Frank or Dean or one of these people sang one of these great standards, sometimes even though you have the similar voice type and you realize it's not a good fit, you have to look at it sort of like an actor looks at a script or their material. I kind of look at it now like casting, where if, can I believably say these words to someone, let alone sing them? Because if they're not going to buy me saying them, they're really not going to buy me singing them. So some of those great Sinatra swingers that I can sing and I've sung in concert, I wouldn't necessarily record because it's just, there's either not a readiness, like A Very Good Year or My Way. I feel like 40 years out from singing either. You get through the second verse and you're done. But
You've heard it all.
Yeah, exactly. When I was 30, well, I'm not there yet. So it's interesting. I try and find, I've been lucky through the pandemic to kind of build the following through social media, which has been a wonderful tool for me. And largely it's a lot of millennials and Gen Zers. 70+% of my audience is under the age of 30, which is an amazing thing for the genre, because you'd expect it to be so much older, which isn't a bad thing, but it's all new to these kids
Exactly.
who might not even have a reference for Sinatra or Billie Holiday or Nina Simone. So I try and find things that tickle me that I think will also tickle other people as well. And I think it comes down to great melodies, great lyrics, great stories. I do love kind of the bluesy, minory songs, that you can, I've done quite a few of those that invariably wind up kind of sounding a little John Barry, a little James Bond-like. So it's so many things. Sometimes you'll also try and take a really popular one that's been done to death, but just flip it on its head in a way that it's like, oh, I hadn't considered doing it that way, or, and even like, I guess That Face, it's sort of like, I wanted to do a Broadway tune, but I thought, so many people have done Street Where You Live or Guys and Dolls or Oklahoma or something like that. Why not try and do something from the last decade or two? And that ultimately still sounds old. So it's interesting. And I've learned through the process of doing this, sometimes you leave some on the recording room floor. Like I remember when we were doing the Rod Stewart, he didn't write it, but he had the hit with it, Some Guys Have All the Luck, in Melancholy Hill. There was a third single, Madonna's Crazy for You, that we did as a bossa Latin ballad. And it was a beautiful Callum arrangement, but and we recorded it, and I started singing to it, and we tried 15 Ways from Sunday to make it work, but it was just a classic case of the wrong song, great arrangement, but just didn't really work for me. I wasn't buying it. And you could put it out and go, well, he sings it nice, but I don't think it would move the needle. And there are those recordings from those artists that we all love that you kind of go, it's not a bad recording, but I don't feel like they were invested. Their heart wasn't into it. So I try and find stuff that I can really get my heart and head into, if only to not get too in your head about it. It's a funny little dance you do every time you record these things, because you want to give yourself over to the music and not be too precious with it. I mean, I think sometimes the Great American Songbook, which deserves so much reverence, I think sometimes is put too high on a pedestal, and it winds up being a little out of reach or too safe. You get a lot of these standards albums from aging rock stars and whatnot, and they do these things, and look, it's just my opinion, I'm not trying to slight anyone, but it does feel like they're scraping the bottom of the barrel in how they approach them. It's like, well, anyone can do these, and it's like, no, these are deceivingly simple, not so simple songs to do. And I think when you're working with someone as great as a Callum or any arranger of that caliber, you can really invest yourself in these things and find some new things that are maybe a little daring. I mean, I don't think I'm a rebel in it, but there are some people who have listened to my stuff, I think, and I'm actually kind of pleased either they really love it or they really don't love it. But I'd rather be slightly polarizing than be in that middle zone where it's like, well, they're stirring with the brushes and it's all very pleasant, but it's not moving.
Well, before Kevin jumps into the question, I know that you mentioned My Way, of course, written by the wonderful Paul Anka. And around about 25 years ago, he came out with 2 albums of pop music redone and revamped, all the rest of it. And they were very pleasant. But whereas yourself, I feel you've taken the songs, but you're able to respect the songs, but push the boundaries. I think Paul Anka played safe with his. And I know that when on jazz music, when I play one of them, people go, okay, but when I play the tracks for yourself, I said the phone lights up. They go, love that arrangement.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. Yeah, I'm very happy about that. I think as long as people show themselves, I think sometimes the middle of the roadness that we feel is sometimes that the artist doesn't feel like maybe they're a little handcuffed, that they don't have enough support under them or enough of a choice made that they can really go all out. I think sometimes that's half the battle, is just finding the ways to allow you to be your most authentic self, because I think that's what people, whether or not they get all intellectual about it, I think they respond to authenticity regardless of the genre you're in. I think when they see me performing these things, regardless of whether or not they really love it or not, they kind of go, well, we know who he is, and we know that he's really enjoying himself, or he's really feeling the story, the song, and so I try and choose material, release material that's kind of the bar I've set, and that's obviously something that you get hopefully a little bit better at figuring out as you record, and also have to leave some on the cutting room floor because you didn't, you have those blind spots, and I think that's all part of the process too. You learn so much from the ones that don't work. We tried recording a version of Al Stewart's Year of the Cat, which is a great song, about 7.5 minutes long. And it was a classic case that we didn't do enough to it. It kind of felt like, I'm just kind of doing karaoke in a different key, which is something that doesn't interest me, or I don't think the audience either. So, yeah, a lot of learning, but I'm thrilled to hear people are responding.
Kevin, over to you, sir.
Well, Matt, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, back in 2018, you worked with Grammy Award-winning producers Buddy Cannon and Matt Rollins on the legendary country music icon Mr. Willie Nelson's Sinatra tribute, My Way. Now, this tribute was Willie's 68th solo project.
That's right.
And you and you provided all of Mr. Nelson's guide vocals for the project. In 2019, the record was awarded the Grammy Award for Best Traditional Pop Vocal Album. In 2020, you collaborated again with Willie on his highly acclaimed 71st solo project and follow-up to his My Way with That's Life, which released in February of 2021. Now, I'm a big fan of Willie Nelson.
Uh-huh.
And what I would like to know, share with our viewers, how was the experience of working with the legendary Willie Nelson, who would have been probably 85 at the time you worked with him the first time?
Yeah. But timeless as an icon. Timeless.
Did he look at you and think, I've got boots older than this kid? Tell us your best, if you get a short, quick story about working with Willie Nelson.
Yeah. Sure. Well, you know, that project, both those projects were so special because one was at Capitol, one was at East West, both historic studios here that Sinatra and Elvis, a lot of ghosts in those places. And his producers reached out to me, and Willie was actually on the road. Willie tours into the ground with Trigger, his guitar. He's on his bus having a hell of a time. And so they wanted someone to come in and just kind of record with the band live on the floor, like Sinatra would have done, actually, to kind of get a sense of where the tempo should be. Is this the right key for Willie? You know, so I got in there, and I only kind of met Willie after the recording sessions, because what would happen is we would record 3 or 4 cuts a day. They'd send it to him kind of remotely on his bus. He'd listen and go, that sounds good. And of course, he'd do it his way. I mean, no one is going to do it quite like Willie. So I was really just there. I certainly don't mean to overinflate my role, but it was a real thrill recording with those musicians and those producers. And then for Willie that same night to go, this sounds really good. Okay, good. Who's the kid? And then I met him briefly after a concert out in Palm Springs. He was out in Palm Desert, and just a very sweet, dear man, and appreciative. He's a man of very few words, but that whole process, and then coming back for the second record, and we were supposed to do a third, but then COVID hit.
Right.
But I think he really gets such great joy out of those songs. And, you know, that those records have a real kind of country flavor to them that I think really works. They're jazzy, but they, you know, there's those elements that make them distinctively Willie. And I think it gives it that edge that there's nothing middle of the road about them, and certainly nothing middle of the road about Willie. And so I think it's a great success and a real thrill to just be a small part of. And they kind of said, "Oh, you should do a duet." And I said, "Oh, that'd be fun." And so maybe one of these days. But no, just that whole crew.
I'm going to ask a question now for a very quick answer. Ready? Okay. Sure. Then heralded by Grammy winner Steve Tyrell, who we love. I mean, what an amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. As an important message for the Great American Songbook, you have accumulated over 3 million streams on Spotify, 4.5 million views on YouTube, and 160,000 followers on Instagram. We take our hat off to you. I mean, that is a lot of hard work.
Oh, thank you.
Deserved. My question to you, very quick one. Okay, then, can you remember where you were and what you were doing the first time you heard one of your songs played on the radio?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I was in my car. It was on K-Jazz, which is the big jazz and blues station here in Los Angeles that beams out. I was in traffic and forgot my phone, so I just had the radio on in a rare move. And I swear to God, I turned it on, and it was the downbeat of one of these songs. And I went, oh, and then of course on the bar, it's like Matt Forbes. Wow, that's so. I think it was Some of These Days, I think it was Some of These Days. And there's nothing quite like it. It's a thrill, you know, because you just think this is insane. And I remember I was in an Olive Garden. Not by choice.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug, you know, unless they pay me.
Restaurants available to go and eat.
Yeah. Well, you know, it was in a trip. I think it was like one of those express, you know, ones. I was traveling and I came on, you know, and of course, when you start hearing yourself in Olive Garden, you know, you've really made it, because it's like you go in there as a kid on vacation or trips and you'd hear Sinatra and you go, oh, I'm on there now. And it's so funny, steakhouses and friends from all over. One was in Washington, D.C. the other week, and they're like, hey, we heard you in Mastro's. And you're like, cool, you know. It never gets old. It's a real thrill. And then, Sirius XM, you know, it's a great way of people still discovering this music, you know. Social media is a very powerful tool, but radio is still, I think, king. It's great.
You're a very modest man, so I can't imagine the first time you were in the car that you put the windows down, you were going, "This is me, this is me."
Honking the horn, yeah. Everyone else dial in to 88.1. I'm a big deal.
Yeah, Matt, I also wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
we talk about Studio A at Capitol Studios.
Yeah.
I have to ask you, it seems to me I recognize that microphone I've seen on a couple of your videos.
Yes.
Sinatra recorded with the groundbreaking Newman U47 capacitor valve microphone,
Yes.
which captured every nuance of his voice without being overpowered by the orchestra. So from watching your videos, it appears that you've recorded in Studio A with that iconic U47. Is that correct?
Yes, they call it the Frank, the old U47. The Frank, and it actually on the box, I'll send you a photo, but it actually has Frank and Sharpie, and you're just like, and all this, the stool, the podium, they're all from 1956, 57. And I mean, the mojo, Studio B is more or less unchanged. They made the control room a little bit bigger, but you walk in there and it looks like those great sessions photos that you see in those albums. But yeah, that microphone, I mean, you get close enough, you can smell the nicotine still, off of it. And I mean, it's really caked in there. And the engineers will say, won't make you sound like Frank, but it makes you sound like the best version of you. It's really,
yeah, no question.
It's unreal. Yeah, very magical microphone.
Did they tell you whatever you did, don't touch the mic? Just don't touch it.
Yeah. Actually, those things are like stage hammers. You can really, they're like they're German tanks, really, and they get better with age. I mean, and the capsule's a little delicate, but I'll tell you, it's a hearty microphone, and for my voice type, the baritones especially, it sounds so great, and it puts you in that mode too when you're recording in front of that big condenser microphone. It kind of links you up with the past, which is
okay. I've got a couple of things then. So we've already spoken about the Could I, Would I, Should I? Brilliant album. The Solitary Man, another fabulous album.
Thank you so much. The red.
Right. Now, very quickly,
yes.
We opened up the show with Mad About You. I can tell you now that my wife and my daughter, every 2 years, they have a massive dance studio here in England, and they're going to be holding a dance show. It's called And the Beat Goes On, from the Fabulous Whispers. And basically, because we've been shut down for the last 2 years because of COVID, and now it's come back up again, I can tell you that the opening of the show is your piece.
No way.
And
no way, that's fantastic. That's very exciting.
And it's going to be done. I've seen the lighting effects and that, and I'm on the sound desk. I do the sound desk, what I used to do. So I'm on the sound desk. I can tell you, I'm pulling the volume a couple of notches up.
Oh, that's very kind. That's great. Snap a little video. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I will send you the video of that thing.
Please. Okay. Please do.
It'll be coming end of July, the show. It's a 3-day show. About 2,500 people will watch it. So just
amazing.
Now, before time runs out, because the lady time is not on our side at the moment. The curtain's coming down slowly.
I see that. We got the timer on. It's beat the clock.
We're going to go this way. So listen, where can people buy your music? Where can they obtain it from?
They can get it on Amazon.com. They ship worldwide too for very reasonable rates. So Amazon, you can get the first 2 albums and Christmas EP, and then everything else you can download on iTunes and stream on Apple Music, Spotify, Deezer, Pandora, and YouTube. You can watch us record most of these songs. We've got my film crew in there for the music video, so you can actually watch us record most of the songs off that Red album, and pretty much everything subsequently. So,
okay. You mentioned about the Christmas one. That's the 12 minutes of Christmas. Great, another one, the fabulous one.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think time has virtually had it with herself. Now, we want to see you in the UK touring. We want to see you over here.
Yes, me too.
From Jazz Across the Pond, on behalf of Kevin and myself, thank you, sir, for joining us here on our show. And
thank you.
Fabulous. Keep the music coming on, sir.
Lots more to come. Lots more to come.
Kevin.
And just so everybody knows, we're going to be closing out tonight's interview with a reimagined version of the 1933 classic, The Boulevard of Broken Dreams. And if I might say, Matt, I've got a lot of favorites: Nat King Cole, Tony Bennett, and Diana Krall. Yours rates right up there, buddy. Thanks for being with us today, and it's been our pleasure.
Truly a pleasure meeting you both. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. It's been our pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, jazz across the pond. Stay safe in this crazy world we live in. Mr. Matt Forbes, from everybody here, bye-bye.
Be well. I walk along the street of sorrow, the boulevard of broken dreams, where gigolo and gigolette can take a kiss without regret, so they forget their broken dreams. You laugh tonight and cry tomorrow when you behold your shattered schemes. And gigolo and gigolette wake up to find their eyes are wet with tears that tell of broken dreams. Here is where you'll always find me, always walking up and down. But I left my soul behind me in an old cathedral town. The joy that you find here you borrow, you cannot keep it long, it seems. But gigolo and gigolette still sing a song and dance along the boulevard of broken dreams. But I left my soul behind me in that old cathedral town. The joy that you find here you borrow, you cannot keep it long, it seems. But gigolo and gigolette still sing a song and dance along the boulevard of broken